At the edge of a sweltering summer twilight, when the ocean's gentle roar met the laughter of strangers and every shadow held a secret, I stumbled upon a truth that shattered my blissful ignorance. I had always admired her fierce independence, especially when she adamantly refused to be tagged in our vacation photos, dismissing our memories as personal and unshareable. But that evening, as I casually scrolled through her phone, I discovered a hidden album that spoke a silent language of heartache, betrayal, and secrets too painful to ignore. In those first captured moments, my world tilted irreversibly, and I knew nothing would ever be the same. I remember the vacation vividly. We had driven along a sun-dappled coastline, the salty breeze carrying laughter and promises of adventure. Every snapshot on social media boasted endless smiles and carefree moments, except for hers. While friends and family eagerly tagged and celebrated their moments together, she always declined. At first, I accepted it as her quirk, a desire to keep her digital identity separate from the curated chaos of the online world. I even admired that she maintained a sense of privacy in an era that celebrated oversharing. But as our vacation progressed, that unexplained reticence began to gnaw at me. I'd watch her carefully, noticing the way she would glance away when a colleague tried to snap a candid shot, or how she would firmly insist, "Not this time," when our relatives urged her to join the group photos. I chalked it up to her being modest or perhaps even haunted by a personal insecurity. But beneath that veneer of gentle evasiveness, I sensed an undercurrent of sorrow, an emotion that I couldn't quite place. On the final day of our trip, as dusk settled over a deserted beach and the horizon burned with hues of crimson and gold, we returned to our hotel room. I thought it was the perfect moment to relax together, to reminisce about our shared journey over the past week. I made myself a cup of coffee, while she retired early with a soft, apologetic smile and a promise to be up for breakfast. That night, curiosity overcame me. I reached for her phone, an action I had never taken before, and began to explore the gallery. Amid the neatly arranged vacation pictures where everyone else beamed at the camera, I discovered an album she had carefully hidden away. The folder's title was cryptic, written in her neat, looping script, "Unseen." My hands trembled as I tapped on the album, half expecting it to be empty. Instead, it was filled with images that bore no resemblance to the sunny, carefree days we had spent together. The first photo showed a dimly lit room with a single figure sitting by a window, her face partially obscured by shadows. My heart pounded as I swiped through the album. There were photos of her, unmistakably her, but in settings I'd never seen. An empty park bench on a rainy day, a tear-stained letter resting on a desk, and, most startling of all, a series of selfies taken in a motel room, her eyes distant and pained. As I scrolled further, I found images that hinted at something far more complex than a mere desire for privacy. There were pictures of whispered conversations over late-night dinners in dimly lit restaurants, photos of clandestine meetings with unfamiliar faces, and snapshots where she wore a look of sorrow that contradicted the vibrant energy she usually exuded. One photo in particular froze me in place, a candid shot of her, mid-laugh yet with eyes that shimmered with unshed tears, taken in a corner of a crowded bar. It was as if she had been living two separate lives, one that I knew, filled with sunny vacation days and shared dreams, and another shrouded in loneliness and hidden pain. The more I looked, the more I realized that the album wasn't just a collection of out-of-place vacation snapshots. It was a visual diary of moments she had chosen to hide from me, a silent testament to a struggle she had kept secret. I began to piece together fragments of a story, late nights spent in solitude, encounters with strangers that hinted at a search for comfort, and an undercurrent of despair that pulsed beneath the surface of her carefully curated social presence. It was as if every image was a window into a side of her I had never known existed, a self that was vulnerable, conflicted, and desperately yearning for something beyond the confines of our shared life. My heart ached with a mixture of betrayal, confusion, and an overwhelming sadness that I could neither articulate nor escape. Had I been so blinded by my own assumptions that I missed the subtle signs of her inner turmoil? I reread her untagged status messages and scrolled through countless photos, each one deepening the chasm between the woman I thought I knew and the one revealed in this hidden album. I couldn't understand how the same person who smiled warmly in the sunlight could harbor such dark, unspoken stories. That night, lying awake in the silent dark of our hotel room, I wrestled with my emotions. The soft hum of the air conditioner and the distant murmur of the ocean outside did little to soothe the storm raging within me. I questioned every memory, every moment of our vacation, trying to discern when things had begun to change. Had her refusal to be tagged been a cry for help, a silent signal of the pain she was enduring? Or was it something more deliberate, a way to shield herself from the public scrutiny of her dual existence? As dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in tentative strokes of pink and orange, I made a decision. I couldn't let this discovery fester in the shadows of my mind. I needed to confront her, not in anger, but with the desperate hope of understanding. With the hidden album still open on my phone, I waited for her to wake, my mind a whirlwind of questions that threatened to drown me in uncertainty. I knew that the conversation we were about to have could redefine everything between us, for better or worse. I remembered the first time I truly admired her, the strength in her quiet resolve, the compassion in her gentle smile. Now, those same qualities were overshadowed by a painful vulnerability that I had never seen. I felt a mix of sorrow and determination, sorrow for the hidden loneliness I now recognized in her, and determination to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. That morning, as I sat by the window watching the new day break, I promised myself that I would not let fear dictate my next move. I would confront her with the evidence I had found, and I would listen, even if the truth was one I wasn't ready to accept. In that fragile moment between night and day, I wondered, was this the beginning of an unraveling, or the first step toward a deeper understanding of the woman I loved? The hidden album had already spoken volumes in its silence, and I knew that the coming conversation would be the turning point of our story, a moment when secrets would be laid bare, and the real reasons behind her refusal to be tagged in our vacation photos would finally be revealed. That morning, as sunlight slowly edged through our hotel room's drawn curtains, I found myself sitting at the edge of the bed with the hidden album still open on my phone. My hands trembled as I stared at the pictures, the stark contrast between the joyful snapshots we shared publicly and these raw, unguarded images I'd never seen before. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was holding a Pandora's box of secrets, and the weight of it was almost too much to bear. After a long, agonizing hour, her soft footsteps finally signaled that she had awakened. I heard her shuffle toward the bathroom, and the sound of running water mixed with her hushed sighs reached me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to do. I knew that confronting her might shatter any hope of reconciliation, but I couldn't keep living in the ambiguity of her silence. When she emerged, her eyes were red-rimmed from sleep, and she wore the same guarded expression that had haunted me since our arrival. I motioned for her to sit, and as she sank into the chair across from me, I placed my phone on the table, the hidden album still visible on the screen. My heart hammered in my chest as I spoke, my voice a mix of desperation and hurt. "Sarah," I began slowly, "I need to talk to you about something important." She hesitated, her eyes flicking to the phone. I could see the color drain from her face as she registered what I was showing her. "What is this?" she asked softly, a tremor in her voice betraying her calm facade. "It's your album," I said, my tone gentle but firm. "The one you've hidden. I found it, and I've been trying to understand why you refuse to be tagged in our vacation photos. Why you've kept these pictures away." A long silence followed. I could see the internal battle playing out in her eyes, the hurt and shame mingling as she struggled to find words. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. I never wanted you to see these." I leaned forward, my own eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Then please, help me understand. I need to know what you're hiding from me, Sarah. We promised honesty." She ran a hand through her hair and looked down, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. "It's not that I don't love you," she began, her voice wavering, "but sometimes I feel like there's a part of me that you can't see, the part that I'm ashamed of." My mind raced with questions. Ashamed of what? Is it about the photos? Is it about someone else? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though my heart pounded with both fear and betrayal. Her eyes filled with tears as she finally met my gaze. "I've been struggling with who I am, Mark. The photos, they aren't vacation pictures at all. They're memories of times when I wasn't sure I deserved happiness, when I was trying to figure out my own identity. They're from moments when I felt utterly alone, even when I was surrounded by people. I didn't want anyone to see that vulnerable side of me, even you." For a moment, I was silent, absorbing her words. The confession was not what I had expected. I had assumed the hidden album was proof of an affair, a secret romance that I had been oblivious to. Instead, here was a woman confessing that she had been battling inner demons, that the photos captured her raw, unfiltered emotions, moments of despair, isolation, and self-doubt that she had hidden behind the bright smiles of our curated vacation albums. But why? I asked, my voice quieter now, laced with both sorrow and confusion. Why hide these moments if you feel you deserve them? Why not trust me enough to share your truth? Her eyes glistened as she looked away. "I was terrified, Mark," she whispered. "Terrified that if I showed you the real me, the me who sometimes feels lost and unworthy, you'd see me as broken, as someone who isn't enough. I've always tried to put on a brave face, to be the perfect partner, but behind that, I've been fighting my own battles. I felt a twist in my gut. The hidden album wasn't evidence of infidelity, it was evidence of a loneliness so profound that she couldn't bear to let anyone see it. I recalled moments when she'd seemed distant, when her eyes carried a sadness I couldn't quite reach. I remembered the nights when she would lie awake and I'd hear her quiet sighs from the next room. Have you talked to anyone about this? I asked softly. About how you feel? She shook her head slowly. Not really. I've been too afraid to open up. I've tried to manage it on my own, thinking I could bury it beneath work and travel. But those photos, they remind me of the times when the facade slipped, when I wasn't as strong as I pretended to be. I leaned back, my mind reeling. Everything I'd taken for granted, the reason behind her refusal to be tagged, the subtle hints I'd brushed off as mere quirks, now took on a new, heartbreaking significance. So you've been hiding your pain, your vulnerabilities, I said, my voice cracking with the effort to hold back emotion. I thought our vacations were moments of joy for you. I thought we were sharing our lives. But you were battling something far more intense than I ever realized. Tears welled up in her eyes as she reached for my hand. I never meant to hurt you, she said, her voice choked with regret. I was so afraid that if I let you see me at my worst, you'd leave. I've always admired your strength, your ability to face the world without fear. I was scared I wouldn't be able to measure up. I pulled my hand away gently, conflicted by the dual pull of anger and empathy. Sarah, I'm hurt, not because I'm angry about the photos, but because I feel you've kept something so important from me, I said, struggling to choose my words. I want to be there for you, to help you through whatever pain you're experiencing. But if you're not willing to share your true self with me, how can we ever truly be together? Her eyes shimmered with tears as she lowered her gaze. I don't know, she admitted softly. I thought that by keeping that part of me hidden, I could protect both of us. I was wrong. I see that now. The silence between us was heavy, filled with the echoes of unspoken apologies and shattered illusions. I remembered the many times I had looked at her, thinking I saw a spark of something deeper, a glimmer of sadness beneath her confident smile, but had always pushed it aside as a fleeting moment. Now, that sadness was laid bare, and it pained me to realize that I had missed so many silent cries for help. Sarah, I said slowly, I don't want you to feel like you have to hide any part of yourself. I love you, all of you, the strong, the joyful, and yes, even the broken parts. We all have moments when we're not our best selves. But you have to let me in. I need to know the real you, no matter how painful it might be. Her eyes searched mine, trembling with hope and fear. I'm sorry, Mark, she whispered. I've always been afraid that if I showed you my weaknesses, you'd see me as less than I am. I've spent so much time pretending that everything was fine, that I was the picture of perfection, that I never needed help. But the truth is, I've been drowning in my own insecurities. I was ashamed of how fragile I felt. I swallowed hard, fighting back my own tears. I wish you had trusted me enough to tell me that, instead of hiding behind a false image. I'm not perfect either, Sarah. I have my own fears, my own doubts. But we can only grow stronger if we're honest with each other. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know. I wish I'd had the courage to be honest from the start. I thought I was protecting you, but I was only isolating myself. I don't want to lose you because of my fear. I want us to be real, even if it means facing pain. I took a long, shuddering breath as I considered her words. The raw confession in front of me was more heartbreaking than I'd ever imagined, but it also offered a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this was an opportunity for us to rebuild on a foundation of genuine understanding rather than carefully curated perfection. Yet, the betrayal of secrecy had cut deep, and I wasn't sure if I could simply forgive it with a few heartfelt words. For what felt like an eternity, we sat there, our voices barely rising above a whisper, recounting fragments of a past that had been hidden in shadows. She told me about the lonely nights spent in hotel rooms, the overwhelming pressure to maintain an image of success, and the silent battles with depression that had crept in despite all her outward accomplishments. I listened, each revelation chipping away at the anger I'd felt earlier, replacing it with a profound sorrow for the pain she had borne alone. But as she spoke, I also recognized that her hidden album was not merely a collection of somber snapshots, it was a testament to her resilience. In each image, I saw the glimmer of a woman who had fought hard against the tide of her own doubts, who had tried to capture moments of beauty even in the midst of despair. It was as if she was pleading with herself, and perhaps with me, to acknowledge that her struggles were real and that she deserved to be seen, even if that meant exposing the raw edges of her soul. I reached out tentatively. "Sarah, I want to help you. I want us to work through this together, but I need you to promise me something, that you won't hide these parts of yourself from me anymore. I need to know you, the whole you, even the parts that are painful. Only then can we truly begin to heal." Her eyes, red and swollen, met mine with a mixture of remorse and fragile hope. "I promise, Mark. I'll try. I don't want to be this person who hides in the shadows. I want to be honest with you, even if it scares me." For a long moment, we sat in that fragile silence, the weight of our past and the uncertainty of our future mingling in the space between us. I wasn't sure if our love could survive the full exposure of all its hidden layers, but I knew one thing: I couldn't walk away now without trying to make things right. The hidden album, once a symbol of secrets and isolation, had now become a catalyst for change, a painful reminder that true intimacy demands vulnerability, even when it hurts. That morning, as we sat together in the half-light of our room, we began the arduous process of unearthing the truths we'd both long kept hidden. We talked about our fears, our disappointments, and our hopes for the future. It wasn't an easy conversation. There were moments of heated silence and tearful apologies, moments when the past seemed too heavy to bear. But with each word, we chipped away at the walls that had grown between us, exposing the raw, tender core of what we once believed was unbreakable. I knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, that healing might take years and that forgiveness might never come easily. Yet, as I looked into her tearful eyes, I saw a reflection of my own desire for authenticity, a longing to be seen and understood in all our messy, painful glory. In that moment, I chose to believe that our love was worth fighting for, even if it meant embracing a truth that was as harsh as it was liberating. And so, as the day unfolded and the shadows of our hidden past slowly gave way to a tentative promise of a new beginning, I made a silent vow, to never again let fear or pride keep us apart. We would face the darkness together, unafraid to share our vulnerabilities, and in doing so, perhaps find a way to rebuild a love that was stronger and more real than any illusion we had ever known. That day, after our long conversation and the raw, painful exchange of hidden truths, the silence that followed felt both heavy and full of possibility. I left our small apartment that evening with a heart still bruised but strangely lighter, as though unburdening ourselves had opened a narrow window for healing. The walk home was long and solitary. Under a sky peppered with early stars, I replayed every moment in my mind, the tremble in her voice, the look of vulnerability in her eyes, and even the quiet resolve behind her promise never to hide again. I couldn't help but wonder if this painful unveiling was the prelude to something new, or merely the beginning of an endless ache. Over the next several days, I immersed myself in an attempt to make sense of it all. I found solace in the mundane, a brisk walk in the park at sunrise, a quiet coffee at a corner cafe, and long hours spent scribbling thoughts into a worn notebook. I wasn't sure if I was mourning the loss of a relationship I once knew or mourning for her, the person who had felt so distant yet so real in her hidden moments. Sometimes, as I sat alone, I'd reread the images from that secret album that had started it all, each picture a painful reminder of her solitude, her hidden battles. And yet, as hard as it was to face, I realized that these images were not just symbols of her pain. They were windows into her truth, a truth she'd been too scared to share until now. In the quiet solitude of one rainy afternoon, I visited a familiar beach, a place where we'd once spent blissful, sun-drenched days together. The rhythmic sound of waves crashing against the shore, and the gentle, insistent murmur of the wind through the dunes, soothed me in a way nothing else could. I sat on a weathered log, letting the cool salt air wash over my face as I contemplated the future. I recalled her whispered apologies, the tear-streaked confessions, and I wondered if I could ever truly let go of the hurt. But as I watched the tide recede and then roll in again, I began to understand that healing, much like the ocean, was a continuous process. There were ebbs and flows, moments of despair mixed with bursts of unexpected beauty. That evening, I decided it was time for another conversation, a chance to see if the fragile promise we'd made that morning could grow into something real. I arranged to meet Sarah at a quiet rooftop cafe overlooking the city. The urban skyline glowed softly against the twilight, a reminder that even after darkness, light finds a way to return. When I saw her waiting, seated at a small table adorned with a single candle flickering in the gentle breeze, I felt a tumult of emotions surge within me, apprehension, longing, and a cautious hope that perhaps we could rebuild, step by fragile step. "Hi, Mark," she said softly as I approached, her voice carrying a gentle tremor of remorse and expectation. I nodded, unable to muster a smile immediately. We sat, and for several long moments, silence stretched between us as the city hummed quietly below. Finally, she broke the silence. "I've been thinking a lot about what we said that day," she began, eyes fixed on the pattern of light across the table. "About how I've hidden parts of myself, and how that hurt you. I want to try, if you're willing, to let you in on everything, no more secrets." Her words struck a chord in me. I had longed for honesty, for a raw, unfiltered connection, even if it meant facing discomfort. "I want that too, Sarah," I replied, my voice quieter than I intended. "I need to understand you, all of you, the good and the painful parts. I know it won't be easy, and I'm not saying it will fix everything overnight, but I'm willing to try if you are." Tears welled up in her eyes as she reached across the table, her hand trembling as it brushed against mine. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I was terrified of being seen as weak, and I thought that if I kept my struggles hidden, I could protect you, from the darkness inside me, from the parts one was ashamed of. I realize now that hiding only drove a wedge between us." The confession, raw and unadorned, opened a channel of understanding I hadn't known existed between us. In that moment, I realized that our love, though marred by secrecy, had the capacity to evolve, if we were both brave enough to embrace vulnerability. I squeezed her hand gently. "I know you were scared," I said softly. "I was scared too, of losing you, of not being enough. But I believe that if we're honest, truly honest with each other, we might find our way back to something genuine." In the weeks that followed, we embarked on a painstaking journey of rediscovery. We set aside hours every evening to talk, not just about our day or the superficial details of work and life, but about our dreams, our fears, and even the small moments of sorrow that we'd each hidden away. Sometimes, the conversations would stretch into the early hours of the morning as we sat on the living room floor, wrapped in a shared blanket of tentative forgiveness and raw emotion. There were days when the old wounds would flare up, when a stray comment or a familiar scent would transport us back to that painful discovery in the hidden album. On those days, we would take walks together, sometimes in silence and sometimes talking softly about what hurt us. We learned to navigate the delicate balance between remembering and moving on. I began to see that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or excusing what had happened, it was about accepting that we were imperfect beings, capable of both great love and deep pain, and that our worth was not diminished by our flaws. As our healing progressed, I started to notice subtle changes in the way we interacted. The guarded looks gave way to moments of genuine laughter, and the forced smiles slowly transformed into expressions of real joy. We revisited old haunts, the beach where we once built sandcastles in carefree abandon, the park where we had picnicked under an old oak tree, and even the little diner where we had our first date. With each visit, the memories of our happier times mingled with our new experiences, creating a tapestry that was richer and more complex than before. One afternoon, while we were going through a box of old photos together, she hesitated at a particular album. "I've never let you see this one," she said, her voice soft and apologetic. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized the album, another secret folder on her phone, but this time it was shared willingly. I opened it, and there it was, a collection of pictures from a time long before our relationship had become a comfortable routine. I saw her laughing with friends at a music festival, candid moments of self-discovery on solo trips, and even a few photos where her eyes held an intensity and vulnerability I had never seen in our public life. "These are the parts of me I was afraid to show," she murmured, watching me as I carefully turned each page. "I was scared that if you saw all of it, you'd decide I wasn't the person you fell in love with. I thought I could compartmentalize, keep the fun, adventurous side separate from the parts that hurt, the parts that made me feel less than perfect." I closed the album and looked at her, the weight of the past mingling with the promise of the future in my gaze. "Sarah," I said gently, "I fell in love with you because of all of it, the good and the bad. I don't need you to hide anything from me. I want the whole story, even if it means confronting pain. It's what makes you, you. And I want to stand by you, through every chapter." Her eyes shone with a mixture of relief and gratitude, and in that moment, I felt a spark, a fragile, yet undeniable, hope that perhaps our love could transcend the scars of our shared history. We continued to talk, to peel back the layers of our guarded hearts, and slowly, the walls that had once separated us began to crumble. The journey wasn't linear. There were setbacks, a harsh word here, a lingering silence there. But with each challenge, we learned to communicate better, to listen deeper, and to understand that vulnerability was not a weakness but a pathway to true intimacy. One evening, as autumn began to paint the city in shades of amber and gold, we took a long drive out to the countryside. The landscape, vast and open, mirrored the expansiveness of our newfound commitment to each other. As we drove through winding roads lined with trees shedding their leaves, we spoke about our dreams for the future. We planned for small moments of joy, a shared vacation, a new hobby we could explore together, and even the possibility of a quiet home filled with laughter and honest conversations. In those moments, the pain of the past receded, replaced by a cautious optimism that hinted at a fresh start. I began to notice that Sarah was changing too. The guarded look in her eyes softened, replaced by a quiet determination to embrace life fully. She started taking long walks on her own, not as an escape from her inner turmoil but as a way to reconnect with herself. We even enrolled in a couples workshop on communication, a space where we could learn to articulate our fears and desires without judgment. In that supportive environment, we discovered that our wounds, though deep, could heal with time and effort. The process was slow and sometimes painful, but each honest conversation, each tear shed together, became a brick in the foundation of our rebuilt trust. There were nights, though, when the memory of that hidden album still haunted me, when I would wake up in the dark and wonder if I'd ever truly know her, if the shadows of the past would forever linger in our private moments. In those instances, I would find solace in writing. I kept a journal where I documented not only my feelings but also the small victories, the smile that came naturally during breakfast, the way her hand found mine in silence, the unexpected laughter over a shared memory of our earlier, happier days. These entries became a testament to our resilience, a record of how two people, flawed and fragile, could choose to face the darkness together and still find reasons to hope. As winter approached, blanketing the city in a quiet, reflective hush, Sarah and I reached a turning point. On a snowy evening, when the world outside seemed suspended in a soft, ethereal silence, we sat together by the fireplace. The flames danced, casting flickering shadows on the walls, and we talked about what we wanted from our future, both individually and as a couple. It was then that we made a promise to be utterly honest, no matter how painful the truth might be. We agreed that our love, while wounded, could grow stronger if nurtured by sincerity and mutual respect. I realized then that the hidden album, once a symbol of betrayal and secrecy, had inadvertently become the catalyst for our transformation. It forced us to confront the parts of ourselves we had long kept locked away and to acknowledge that true intimacy demands vulnerability. Though the journey had been tumultuous, it had also been transformative. I no longer saw the album as a weapon used against me but as a mirror reflecting the depths of her pain, and, ultimately, the possibility of healing. Now, as I sit here writing these words, I am filled with a quiet resolve. The scars of the past remain, etched into our hearts like delicate lines that map out the history of our struggle. Yet, they are not markers of defeat. Instead, they serve as reminders of the strength it takes to love, to forgive, and to rebuild. I have come to understand that relationships are not defined by a single act of secrecy or betrayal, but by the courage to face those imperfections head-on and to grow through them. In the soft glow of the winter twilight, as I look out at a city slowly waking beneath a blanket of snow, I feel an undeniable sense of hope. The woman I love is imperfect, scarred by past mistakes and haunted by memories of loneliness. But in her eyes, I now see the promise of renewal, a commitment to be honest, to be vulnerable, and to let go of the fears that once held us captive. Together, we have learned that true connection is not about perfection, but about embracing the full spectrum of our humanity, our joys, our sorrows, and everything in between. I know that the road ahead will not be easy. There will be days when the echoes of the hidden album will resurface, when old wounds will open up and the weight of past secrets will threaten to overwhelm us. But I also know that we have taken our first tentative steps toward healing. We have chosen to face our demons together, to turn the pain into a stepping stone for growth, and to write a new chapter defined not by shame or secrecy, but by love and honesty. And so, with a heart that has learned the hard lessons of betrayal and the gentle art of forgiveness, I step forward into the uncertain future. The memory of that painful discovery will always be with me, a bittersweet reminder of a time when our lives were divided by hidden truths. But it will no longer dictate the terms of our tomorrow. Instead, it has given us a choice, to rebuild, to evolve, and to embrace a love that is as real as it is imperfect. As I close this chapter of our story, I know that the journey of healing continues every day, in every shared smile, every tear, and every moment of honest conversation. Our love, fragile yet enduring, is a work in progress, a mosaic of broken pieces carefully reassembled into something beautiful and true. I choose to believe that despite everything, we have the strength to overcome the darkness and to bask in the light of a future built on trust, compassion, and the courage to love unconditionally.